I'm doing the criticisms, controversies, and questions of The Awakening by Kate Chopin. The overall comments were generally negative. Out of 15 of the criticisms, about 10 of them were negative. So it was very, very negative. The first criticism that we're covering is it was an anticlimactic ending. The story begins to build up with Robert running into Edna in the city, and then it builds up, they fall in love, Edna proclaims her love, and the story climaxes where Edna falls in love with Robert, and Robert has the same feelings for her. And then, as the story climaxes, Robert then leaves Edna for her own good. And as the reader, we're all waiting on what Edna will do next, but she kills herself unexpectedly. Kate Chopin never really explains the reasons why Edna did this, which leaves readers to do most of the thinking outside of the novel, which can be risky. The problem is that the reader will struggle to make sense of what just happened, which in turn will lead them to inaccurate interpretations of the story. Okay, another criticism was it was hard to show sympathy for Edna. Kate Chopin wanted the reader to show sympathy, but as the story progresses, she failed to do that for many readers. First, Edna was living a rich and relaxing lifestyle with her husband and kids. She foolishly starts to flirt with Robert because she was tired of her current husband, and then she starts cheating on her husband with Arobin, and then she kills herself. So what I'm trying to say is no one wants to feel bad for a wealthy upper-class woman who's living the American dream. So that was another criticism. Oh, a quote about that. In the back of the book, one of them said, is, "We are all satisfied when Mrs. Pontellier deliberately swims to her death." So that sums it up for you right there. The third criticism is that it teaches bad morals. One of the things it taught was that it was okay to follow lust and desire, even if you had a husband and kids. It also taught that suicide was the only option for Edna when she was faced with this sort of problem. Also, the morals that the book was conveying went against many religious views. Many religious views believe suicide should never be an option, and that you should never cheat on your spouse. One quote from the back of the book was, "The story was not really worth telling, and its disagreeable glimpses of sensuality are repellent." The last criticism was it was a bad influence to the developing mind. If a young person with a developing mind were to read this novel, it would not be healthy for him or her to learn and follow these morals. A young person would think that it is okay for someone to cheat on someone else. Another quote is, "It is a brilliant piece of writing, but unwholesome in its influence. We cannot commend it." Now, this book also had a lot of compliments. It depicted the hardness of life very well, whether it being dealing with desire, being free from a bad marriage, facing judgment and criticism of one's own personality. Also, the approaches to sensitive subjects that were never talked about at the time. Since this book was written in 1899, it was very groundbreaking at the time. Not many writers approached the subject of women's rights and the reality of relationships and marriages. It showed the truth of life behind the mask, which means that many women at the time always put a face on and showed that everything was fine with their life, whether it be about marriages, friendships, or wealth. Also, women had to abide by their husbands' orders at that time, which wasn't morally right for them. Third, by having Edna make decisions for herself and sending up to her husband in the novel, she was finally able to be free and happy. This is what many women were facing at that time. Now, to get to the controversy, there's two controversies that I'm covering. Why she killed herself, why Edna killed herself, and if she consciously chose to kill herself. Why she killed herself? One view is that people thought she went insane. Edna couldn't handle the pressure of Robert's rejection and her husband's growing concern about her, so she collapsed pretty much internally and became mentally ill. Another viewpoint why she killed herself was they think that she was carrying Arobin's child. This was harder to prove. I found it interesting when I read up on it, but it's still an option. Edna was sleeping with Arobin, and there was no hint of birth control, so there could have been, Edna could have gotten pregnant. But never outright says that, just an option. The second controversy, number 2, is if she consciously chose to kill herself. Some people believe that Edna went insane and killed herself with no thinking. Some hints that point out to Edna's potential insanity is when she was stomping on the wedding ring, or when she fell apart when Victor was singing that song at the dinner party, singing Robert's song. Also, in some parts of the novel, Edna had inner thoughts or secret ideas which could have hinted towards the idea of her being mentally ill. The other side of this is others think that she consciously chose to commit suicide. She went through the reasoning and thought that the only way to be free was to kill herself. I feel like if the reader understood Edna and her personality, then they think that she consciously chose to kill herself. If the reader did not understand Edna and what she was going through, then I would think they would think that she would be insane. Now, some questions of concern for The Awakening. There were many questions arose from the novel. First questions: what other possible options might Edna have given at the time and circumstance? And concerning Edna's death in the novel, many think that Edna could have taken another route instead of committing suicide. One option Edna could have taken was to not commit suicide and live the depressing life she was living before. Another option that Edna could have taken was not to commit suicide, but leave her husband and find a better life somewhere else. The last option Edna could have taken was to ignore Robert's attempt to avoid her, divorce her husband, and live with Robert. The second question was, how would her options differ from options today? The book Awakening was written in the 19th century, 1899, where women's rights were, for the most part, non-existent. And it only had so many options to live her life. Back then, women rarely divorced their husbands, even if marriage was in shambles. Women also could not pursue their dreams and aspirations if they were talented in a particular subject. At that time, women were strapped down to day-to-day chores in their households. If Edna were to be in the 21st century, she would have had many more options than if she would in the 19th century. Today, Edna could have easily divorced her husband and married Robert. Edna could also pursue her talent in painting instead of being abused by her husband and friends. One quote puts this in perspective about her husband verbally abusing Edna, or putting her down. "You were burnt beyond recognition," he added, looking at his wife as one looks at a valuable piece of personal property, which has suffered some damage. She held up her hands, strong, shapely hands, and surveyed them critically, drawing up her fawn sleeves above the wrists. This is one of many examples of why Edna's husband put down Edna. The third question is, would a different resolution besides suicide effectively resolve anything? To revisit the end of the novel, if Edna were to not commit suicide and would have taken any other option that I discussed previously, there would still be implications that Edna must face. If she were to stay alive and leave her husband, then she would also be leaving her children and friends. If she left her husband and couldn't find Robert, then she would be stuck without her husband, children, and maybe a home. The fourth question about The Awakening is, what are some different interpretations on what Kate Chopin was trying to convey at the end of the novel. One interpretation that Chopin was trying to convey was the trouble that many women face at the time. Many women could find true love if they are already married. They could try to get a divorce, but that was unacceptable at the time. Women couldn't also have a unique identity amongst others, and that frustrated many women at the time. Kate Chopin wrote that many women were thinking about, but never had the courage to speak up about it. Another interpretation that Kate Chopin might have been conveying is the power of desire. Sometimes desire can trump any relationship if one is bound to another without true love. A perfect example in the novel is with Edna's relationship with her husband. It is empty and full of emotional abuse and frustration. Edna then finds true love and desire of Robert. Even though Edna is married and has 2 children, she is willing to give them up for the hunger of desire. And here's my works cited. I hope you guys understand the criticisms, controversies, and questions of The Awakening by Kate Chopin.